recently passed, actually just a few years ago, I guess. But he was shot down during the Vietnam War and was a prisoner of war for 7 years. And in an interview, they asked Vice Admiral Stockdale, who didn't make it? Who didn't make it out of the Hanoi Hilton? And he said, oh, that's simple. The optimists. He said, see, the optimists would say, we'll be out of here by Christmas. And then Christmas would come. And Christmas would go. And they'd say, we'll be out of here by Easter. And then Easter would come and Easter would go. And then it was next Christmas. And next Christmas came and next Christmas went. And he said, they died of a broken heart. He said, we cannot confuse the knowledge and the faith that we will survive anything that comes our way, but as soon as we start putting deadlines and details on how it has to happen, we set ourselves up for disappointment. And a phrase that I've come to like and rely on quite a bit is that disappointment requires adequate planning. How many of you have ever taken 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, and planned out a vacation in detail so it would be perfect? But then you went on the vacation and you got back, somebody said, how was it? And you're like, oh, it's all right. But then, do you remember those times where somebody would say, and you had no plans of doing anything, somebody would say, hey, won't you come and go with us? We're going to, and you're like, oh, okay. And you just went on the spur of the moment and had the time of your life. Now, you might ask the question, why does it work like that so many times? It's the law of contrast. See, when you have 9 months to plan your vacation and think about how each day will go and what needs to happen for you to be having a good time, there's no way the reality of that experience can match what you've previewed in your mind. And when you contrast the two, the gap between the two is much like cognitive dissonance. It creates an uneasy feeling in us, and we say, oh. But see, when we haven't had time to preview the vacation, we have nothing but the raw experience of the moment. And so we go, we're not comparing it to anything, and we say, it was a blast. How could it not be? We don't have anything to compare it to. Does that ring a bell for any of you? Here's another scientifically proven visualization technique that kind of ties into what I've already talked about, but in a slightly different way. And this kind of has a somber tone to it, but we'll come back out of that, so bear with me. Everybody in this room right now, there's one thing that I can be sure of, that you can be sure of in the coming days, in some cases weeks, months, years. People you love are going to die. People we love are going to get sick. Things we have now that work fine are going to wear out and break down. Things that we have never even thought about happening yet are going to happen. Things are going to go all to hell in a handbasket at some point. And yet, isn't it interesting that when those things happen, we are so shocked. Somebody tells us, did you know so-and-so's? And you say, you're kidding. Should we really be as shocked about those things as we are? Does that kind of hint at that we maybe stick our head in the sands a lot of time and just pretend like those things don't exist? But here's what happens, isn't it? If we picture the outcome, and this, by the way, is what they found on why that outcome visualization sets you up for a hard fall. Let's say you visualize yourself already having achieved the goal. And that's all you do. You think about yourself every day having already achieved the goal. When one of those events comes along, which it will for all of us, you didn't plan on that. That wasn't part of the picture. And it's like somebody jerks the rug out from under your feet. It's a clash with that picture. And you go, oh, wait a minute, and it shakes your very foundation. And yet, and this seems very counterintuitive, and that's because it is. When you sit down at the beginning of any goal you're going to embark on and make a list of every crazy possible thing that could go wrong, and even some that you really have to work to think about and create, but write it down. But don't stop there. Come up with a plan for what you would do when that happens. Something I've been carrying in my wallet now for 10 years. I can't tell you the level of peace of mind this gives me. Have you ever seen somebody who everything's just sailing along just right and their car breaks down? And they really just had their finances that month planned just for things to happen a certain way, but all this wasn't factored in, and now all of a sudden everything's thrown off, and they're in a panic. They don't know what they're going to do. And isn't it true that the real problem or the real stress of the matter doesn't come down so much to the car being broken down as it does the state of mind and not knowing who to turn to? And do we think clearly when we're stressed out? Not very well. 10 years ago, I wrote down every conceivable problem that I could think of, whether it be financially, whether it be emotionally, crazy things that could happen where you would go, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. But rather than waiting until it happens and then just, what am I going to do? Oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have a sheet with a list of names written down of people in certain situations that I would call. But I didn't stop there. I called those people and I said, hey, here's what I've done. Can I leave you on the list and count on you, or should I take you off and find somebody else? Some of them will tell you, take me off. But a lot of them will say, you can leave me on the list. And what you'll find is that most people, if they tell you you can leave them on the list, they're going to be there. They're going to come through for you. Now when those things happen, you've skipped right past that. I don't know what I'm going to do, who I'm going to turn to. So obviously we're talking about fitness or weight loss tonight, but are there obstacles that you could bump into between point A and point B? Are there days when maybe your schedule gets turned upside down? Are there injuries, and you know there are there ankle injuries, knee injuries that are going to occur with people who embark on this journey? Of course. Are there people that because of a knee injury or an ankle injury, they're not going to be able to walk, they're not going to be able to jog? Sure. And if they haven't thought about it ahead of time, they may say, well, I guess I'm done for this year. But if they've thought about that, written that problem down and thought about it, the YMCA sells memberships to a nice swimming pool. Oh, plan B kicks in when I get hurt. It takes all the stress out of it, or a lot of the stress. You can never take all the stress out of it. Gives you a plan B that you don't have to think about in a time of stress, and you can just immediately turn to. So, before we dive into the next one then, in essence, think about the things that could go wrong. Visualize. And when I say visualize, sometimes people will say, I've tried that, and I can't. I just can't do it. And often what they mean is this. They think that when you say visualize, they're supposed to be able to close their eyes and see it with the same kind of clarity that they can see when they're looking over there, for example. But to that person that says, I can't visualize, I just can't, I'll say, oh, that's okay. And then I'll change the subject, and I'll come back to them a few minutes later, and I'll say, what color's your car? And they'll say, red. Why? Well, how do you know? Well, because I drive a red car. I know, but it's not in here right now. How do you know you drive a red car? And this may go on for 2 or 3 minutes until finally it dawns upon them, I guess I picture it in my mind. If I were to ask you, what color was the house you grew up in? If you told me, you'd say, oh, I remember. My question would be, how specifically and neurologically do you remember? Oh, I make a mental image of my house in my mind. I can see it, and then I give you a report on that. So many of these processes are unconscious until we slow them down and look at them, and then we say, oh, that's how I do that. Environment. Have you ever seen somebody leave, go to the military, and for the people in the room that have been in the military, and I know there are several in the room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You see people leave and go to the military, and their entire life changes. The rates for this are staggering. If they get out of the military and return to the exact same environment they left, within a very short period of time, you see what? You see them return to the same types of behaviors and lifestyles they had before. And in fact, this was part of a huge study that took place about 5 years ago because the military was concerned with this. Why is it that we can take somebody, we can drill into them, we can change their whole lifestyle, we can get them to behave like a model citizen for 4 years, 10 years, or 20 years. But then when they leave, if they go back to hanging out with the same kind of people, in the same types of environment, it's as though nothing happened after about a year.